Hi, welcome back to my channel. For those who don't know me, my name is Katharine, and in today's Vlogmas video, I'm going to be talking about my November reading wrap-up. For those who don't know what a monthly reading wrap-up is, it's essentially me just discussing all of the books that I read in the month. So I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in November, and I'm going to be listing them in the order in which I read them. So let's just talk about the first book that I read in November, and that is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It's the 6th book in the Harry Potter series. I'm a psychopath and I don't like dust jackets on my books, so I don't have a dust jacket on this. But essentially, this book I gave a 5 stars because I've been giving a lot of the Harry Potter books 4 stars except for the third one, which is The Prisoner of Azkaban. And the reason why I gave the third book in the Harry Potter series, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and also this book, the 6th book, The Half-Blood Prince, is because I felt really connected to the characters in both of the books, and I just loved this book. It was such a great depiction of like character growth and how the characters were really coming into themselves. I know this is the 6th book in the series. I only have one more book in the series until I'm finished with the series, so it's kind of bittersweet that I finished this book because that means that the journey of my Harry Potter reading is almost coming to an end. And I actually, if you haven't already seen my December TBR or to be read video, I actually listed the 7th book in the Harry Potter series as a book that I want to read by the end of the year in December, and that means that I'll be done with the Harry Potter series by the end of the year. And it's just something that I'm super sad about ending, but I know that I'm gonna miss the characters and that it was a great series. I can't wait to finish watching the movies too, because for those who don't know, I watched the movies growing up. Like, I did not read the series growing up, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to, as a 28-year-old adult, read the series, because growing up the Harry Potter movies were always super confusing to me, and I wanted to go back and read the book so that I could understand what was going on, and it has actually deepened my understanding of the movies. And I actually am not a big fan of the movies now because they leave so much out of the movies than there is in the books. But that's like always the struggle of like readers who watch movie adaptations of their favorite books. It's always that frustration of it not getting it right in the movie. And then I also find that the movies tend to be really rushed too. Like, it seems like they leave out a lot of information, and then the information they do put in the movies, like, it seems super rushed and they're trying to pack it in. And that's where I think the confusion came in when I was a kid, is like they would brush over like really important details in the movies that was actually really important to the plot in the book. And that's why I was like, what just happened? Like, as a kid, like watching the movies, I just was super confused. But now I'm not as confused because I'm reading the books, I should say, and I'm just loving the series as a whole. Like, I'm not going to go into detail of like what this book is about, just because it would spoil a lot for you if you haven't read the Harry Potter series or watched the movies. I know that Harry Potter has been out for a while now, so if I were to say like what was in this book, like, it honestly wouldn't be that much of a spoiler because like you've had plenty of time to read the books and watch the movies since it's been put out into the world. But like, I'm not like that. I don't want to spoil anything for you because knowing me, I would not want that, you know what I mean? Like, and it did take me, you know, decades to get to the Harry Potter series because I didn't read them growing up and I'm reading them for the first time as an adult. So I don't want to spoil you if you haven't read the series yet and you're like me and you're still waiting to read the series as an adult. So I'm not going to spoil anything from the book. Just know that I gave it a 5 stars. I really enjoyed the plot. I enjoyed the character development. You're really seeing the characters come into their own, like I mentioned before. And I feel like J.K. Rowling, if I can speak English today, you can see that her writing style is really developing as well. Like you can really see like her plots developing, and that you're really getting into the meat of the story in this book. But yes, I did really enjoy this book. I gave it 5 stars. So the next book I read was Where the Road Bends by Rachel Fordham, and I was really excited to read this book because Oshina, a Christian booktuber that I follow here on Instagram, no, not Instagram, on YouTube. I do follow her on Instagram, but here on YouTube I follow her primarily, like I watch her content a lot. And she recommended this on one of her like monthly reading wrap-ups, saying that it was very comparable to Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. And for those who don't know, Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers is like one of my favorite books of all time, if not my favorite book of all time. So it was like an immediate buy, an immediate read for me to read this book and get this book in my hands. So that's what I did. I was super disappointed with this book though. I gave it 3.5 stars. I initially was going to give it 3 stars, but that half of a star bump up was due to the fact by the end of the book there were some like valuable lessons and takeaways from the plot line that I could see it being redeeming of the book, but that was about it. Let me actually go on my Goodreads review on my phone so that I can really give you like my full review of the book, because I feel like my Goodreads review of this book like really captures how I feel about this book, because I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so let me just go through my Goodreads review and rating and just kind of give you a synopsis of like what I thought of the book. So like I mentioned, I was like really excited to get into this book, but I was like really disappointed because I heard it compared to Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers and it just did not live up to that hype. For one, I just wish there was like more faith involved in this book. Like there was mentions of like going to church and God, but like in the everyday decisions of like these characters, like God wasn't really like mentioned. Like even like they did like pray, like there was mention of prayer, but like there was like never a moment where they like prayed together as a couple or anything like that. It was just kind of like them making decisions of their own accord, if that makes sense. It was, let's just say I wish there was just more faith involved in this book. And so the first thing that I had a problem with is that the back of the book, like the synopsis of the book, was really misleading. So I had assumed that like the majority of the plot would be spent on Nora, the main female character, like taking care of Quincy, who is the main male character. So essentially the back of the book reads that Nora is taking care of this guy named Quincy who like stumbles on his property, and he's basically like left for dead, like on her property, on her farm. And she basically has to aid him back to health, and they essentially fall in love. Like that's how the synopsis reads. But it's just very misleading because like, for one, like I thought the majority of the book was going to be about Nora aiding Quincy back to health. I thought that was like going to be the majority of the book. But essentially it was just like the first 4 chapters of the book of that actually happening, and then the rest of the book was not that. Like it was just like their lives going on. It says like 2 years later, actually, like in the book. Like in the book, like after chapter 4 ends, it like has this header where it's like 2 years later, and then it goes on to the rest of their lives, like separated from each other. And that's not a spoiler, like it's within like the first 4 or 5 chapters of the book that happens. So that was first of all misleading, but that's besides the point. I want to get into more of like the actual issues that I had problems with. So it's in third person. So I had a problem with that because I'm finding out that I really like first person. First person in terms of like, I would have loved to have seen like dual perspective where we saw Quincy and Nora's headspace, if that makes sense. Like, I would have loved to have seen how they were thinking in different situations. And that's probably my favorite type of way that authors write in romances, is if they do first person dual point of view, because I feel more connected to the characters when it's in first person, and I also feel like when you give dual perspective, it gives you even a further perspective of like what's going on in both characters' heads. So that was my first like major issue. Second major issue was that I wish there was like more lead up to when Quincy was injured on Nora's farm. I feel like even though we did get like small tastes of their life before Quincy was injured on Nora's farm, throughout the rest of the book, like essentially like in that like 2 years later plot of the book, like you get like snippets of like in like flashbacks of like their life before Quincy got injured on Nora's farm. But like I wish that they had done that before. I wish there was like more lead up to when Quincy was injured on Nora's farm, if that makes sense. Like in the first chapter of this book, you learn that Quincy is injured and is like basically left for dead on Nora's farm, and she finds him with like vultures like surrounding him and like circling him. So that's like all within the first chapter. I wish there was like a few chapters leading up to that point so that you got a like better perspective of like them as individuals before they met, if that makes sense. I feel like that would have served the plot a lot better, and like I probably would have felt a little bit more connected to the characters. And then third, I just really didn't enjoy like this miscommunication trope that happened in this book. I feel like miscommunication should not be a thing in books. Like if you had just simply talked to each other, and what the miscommunication was in this book was like so silly. Like if you had just told her like what was going on, like I understand like there were some like mishaps in trying to tell her, like you tried to tell her a few times, but like just get it out already. Like I don't understand like why you haven't told her already. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be that complicated. And the last thing that I have a problem with is like I just find that authors in general just don't have original plots anymore. Like I feel like this was just like a mediocre version of Redeeming Love. There's like surprisingly like a lot of similarities between Redeeming Love and this book, Where the Road Bends by Rachel Fordham, which is why I'm so surprised like I didn't like this book, because I absolutely loved Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. But I just felt like this was like a mediocre copy and paste of Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. Like it was just weird. Like I wish she had more original thought in this book. Do you know what I mean? I feel like she was just trying to write a book like Redeeming Love, but it honestly just missed the mark. But those were like basically like my main issues with that book. I gave it a 3.5 stars, like I mentioned before. It just did not live up to the hype that I wish it did, and I was really looking forward to that book. I will be reading more Rachel Fordham. I know there's The Letter Tree that I want to read by her, and then there's Beyond Ivy Walls that I want to read by her as well, so hopefully I like those books better than that. And then the third book that I read, this is actually for a book club that I joined, and it's called Better Watch Out by Natalie Walters. It's a romantic suspense novel, and it's just like a stereotypical like rom-com-y type Christmas book with some like suspense thrown in there. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 stars, and it was just like a enjoyable Christmas read. I'm probably not gonna remember like the plot beyond this point in time. Like I'm probably gonna forget what it's about, but it was enjoyable while I read it. If you're looking for a fluffy Christmas book to read this season, I definitely recommend this one. It's just a feel-good book. I definitely do want to read more of Natalie Walters' books, because I heard she is a good Christian romantic suspense author, so I'm looking forward to reading more of her books in the future. it definitely gave me a taste of like what her writing is like, and I enjoyed her writing, so I definitely will be reading more of her books in the future. I am also just like not a romantic suspense reader in general. Like, it's not the type of genre I'm normally gravitated towards, but I'm excited to get into that genre. And then the next book I read was Happily Ever After by Kiera. This is essentially a collection of novellas from the Selection series, which is by far her most popular series that she's written. And if you don't know what the Selection series is, it's basically like a young adult dystopian series where basically what I like to compare it to is like the teenage version of The Bachelor, and it's also dystopian. So I really enjoyed this book in particular because it kind of gives you insights into like 5 different characters in the Selection series and like what their thought process was, because in the Selection series you only get America's point of view, the main female character. America is great and I love her, but I also would have loved to get like the perspective of other characters throughout this process of like the selection of like Maxon choosing the next queen and his new wife. So you do get, like I said, 5 different perspectives mainly, and then there's like a few other like smaller perspectives that you get, but you get the prince, which is obviously Maxon's point of view, the guard, which is Aspen's point of view, the queen, which is Maxon's mom's point of view. I forget her name. Let me get it. Amberly, that's what it is. And then you also get the favorite, which is Marley's point of view. And then you also get Celeste's point of view as well. And then, like I mentioned, there's like a few other characters that you get like small snippets of, but they're not like nearly as long as like the others. So I really enjoyed it. It gave me what I wanted to know about like the different perspectives from the Selection series, and I gave this a 4 stars. Next up, I read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I really wanted to read a classic this upcoming Christmas season, so I ended up just picking this up. It also is surprisingly like really short. I didn't realize that this book was so short. It's only 126 pages in this edition, and it's unabridged. It's the original version by Charles Dickens. It's not like the like a children's version or anything. Like, this is like the real deal. This is like the real A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And for some reason, like, I don't know why I thought it was longer. Like, for some reason I associate classic books with long books. I always think classics are long, but this was not. Like, this was a quick read. I read it within like a day or two, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars just because the writing is like a little bit difficult to understand. They actually have like a little glossary of like what certain words meant, because of course like the language was a little bit different. Even though it's written in English, like they use like older type English words and phrases and things, so that's kind of what threw me off. Like, there was certain things that I had to like look up or go to the back of the book and be like, what is he even talking about? So I enjoyed it for what it was. Like, I have obviously like watched a variety of different adaptations of A Christmas Carol before, so I knew what was going on. Like, it was just like sometimes the language was a little bit of a barrier for me to understand it, but I'm looking forward to reading like more of Charles Dickens' books, and I can't wait to just read more classics in general, because it's kind of like a bucket list thing for me to do, is to read more classics like before I die. I know that's kind of a morbid thought to have, but like I would love to read more classics, and this has inspired me. So yeah. And then the last book I read, if I can put this up right, is the 4th volume in the Remarried Empress manga series. And I'm not going to say too much about this because I don't want to give any spoilers, but essentially the plot of this whole entire series is about this empress, of course, who is struggling with the fact that her husband, the emperor, is in love with a mistress, essentially, and like basically this mistress moves into the palace, and she's like the official like mistress of the emperor, and it's basically this empress who's like struggling with the fact that her husband took this mistress in and is like in love with her. And like there's this scene at the very beginning of volume 1 where like the emperor and the empress are in court like trying to get a divorce. And so that's like not a spoiler, so that's why and even like the title of it says the Remarried Empress. So by the end of this series, I'm assuming that she gets remarried and she divorces the emperor, but basically this whole series is just like about her still being with the emperor while the mistress is still there, and it's just like about their lives together. But yeah, I gave this a 4-star. I gave the first book a 5-star, but all the other books past the first book have been 4 stars just because I feel like there's some politics in the books that I'm just like simply not interested in, and they're like not relevant to the plot, at least from what I can tell so far. And I'm just like, I don't care. But like it's pretty enjoyable like apart from that. But yeah, those were the 6 books that I read this November. I really had a decent reading month. I am glad that I had no DNFs, or in other words, do not finish. That's what that means. But I'm really glad that I had no DNFs this month, because last month in October was rough because I had 3 DNFs, and I'm the type of person that is not about DNFs. I usually was the type of person where like if I was not enjoying the book, like I would just push through because I was like, I need to finish the book. I'm not a quitter. But like I've realized since reading more books that like reading is a hobby for me. And like if I'm not enjoying a book, then why am I reading it? Do you know what I mean? And I do not view now DNFing books as being a quitter, because it's just simply me realizing what my taste in books are. So if anything, it's me not being a quitter and me persevering and realizing what books I like and don't like and what my taste in books are. So I've been finding now that I've been enjoying a lot of the books that I've been reading because of the fact that I'm more strict, I would say, of what books I'm choosing to read, because I'm realizing what books I like and don't like. So yeah, that was my November reading month. I am hoping that you enjoyed what reviews I had of the books. Maybe it inspired you to pick up some of the books that I read in November. Let me know what you read in November, and maybe some of the books that you read in November will be something that I would want to read in the future. So just let me know, and I hope you have a great rest of the day whenever you're watching this, and do all the YouTube things that you know how to do, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!